Thank the earth for providing the foundation that you all stand on, the ancestors that watch over and protect this land, the ancestors of everyone in the room that guided you there, and the groundwork that this gathering is laying for future gatherings. In closing, think of one word that this exercise brought up for you and drop it in the chat if you want. Our agenda for the night will begin. We have some really great panelists here today. We're going to start with Shey Rivera, who is coming from Rhode Island. Then we have Metro Regional Arts Council Executive Director Kathy Muchapow. We have Robin Hickman-Winfield, who's going to talk about the Gordon Parks exhibit at the M Museum. Kathy McTavish will be talking about her project Coming Together. And then finally, we have Janata Petrus Nash of Free Black Dirt, who will be talking about the May Day Chrysalis event that happened in Minneapolis this past weekend. And then we'll do a closing. Each one of them is going to have 15 minutes to talk. They're going to start out by talking for 5 minutes about their project and the work and innovation that they've been doing. If you have questions for them as they're talking, please go ahead and drop those questions in the chat. We have Jen Kraba from Forecast Public Art, who is managing the chat right now. So she will be answering your questions and passing those questions on to us. So thank you. And we are going to get started with Shey Rivera. And I'm gonna read a little bit of Shey's bio here. Shey Rivera Rios, pronouns they, them, is an interdisciplinary artist, a cultural strategist, and arts administrator. Their artistic creations span a myriad of topics, from home to capitalism to queerness and magic. Rivera has 10 years of experience in the nonprofit arts sector, intersecting creative practice with urban planning and racial equity. Rivera was also former artistic co-director of AS220, a renowned arts organization and creative incubator in Providence, Rhode Island, and successor to AS220 founder Humberto Cuenca. And then I'm gonna leave that right there and let Shey tell a little bit more about themselves and the project that they have featured in the workbook, or toolkit, sorry.
Oh, perfect. I can unmute myself. Hi, thank you so much. It's really, really great to be in this space. Thank you to Forecast Public Art. Thank you, Candida. So I'm Shey Rivera, they, them pronouns. I am Boricua, Puerto Rican, de pura cepa, transplanted into Rhode Island in Providence, where I've lived for 10 years. So I'm now I consider myself a diaspora or diasporican. So I'll tell you a little bit about this work, Luna Loa. My creative practice is interdisciplinary, but a lot of it is a little bit in the blurry side of performance and installation and video, blurred with a lot of collaboration and community engagement. So Luna Loa is a performance series that explores ritual through artistic practice. And this series started about 4 years ago. When I was going through a pretty deep personal transition and needed to be much more intentional about my own creative practice and doing it in collaboration. So what I was interested in at that time was exploring how we can create our own rituals, how we can unearth the rituals that we've inherited and connect to ancestral practices, and how we are creating new rituals and new knowledge every day. So with that kind of spirit in mind, I wanted to create a space for experimentation and something really sort of easy access, short level of commitment. So I created this series, and the idea would be that about 12 artists would perform in response to a particular prompt for that performance night. And each of them will create pieces between 2 to 8 minutes long, very quick, very short. Prompts were in relation to land and environment. So using the Farmer's Almanac for inspiration, for example, the hunter moon or the beaver moon, very much in alignment with moon phases. Some people, it's been interesting, some people have asked me about a gender component to that. throughout the 4 years, my perspective on that has evolved. And also as a non-binary Boricua person, my interest in having this connection to the moon is really in terms of connecting us to land, environment, and the rhythms of that we're often disconnected from. So each night would have a topic, and I would give artists also a package of text and images that they could use to just respond to and create. So we've been doing this in a live performance format for those 4 years, and usually in a small space like a black box theater. Recently, we took it to a bigger space, a slightly bigger space at the Wilbury Group Theater here in Providence. And we pivoted when COVID hit. So I'll tell you a little bit about how that worked in terms of how I was thinking about it and how the artists responded to it. So this happened in that intermediate weird space where people were still trying to figure out how big the scope of this impact was and whether or not they should cancel their events, whether or not venues should close. So it was really like at the very beginning of that. I was also in that space, as many of us, really wondering what I should do. And I think that my past experience using Zoom and all these other tools for virtual connection, because I've been doing a lot of work with social movements and artists across geographies. So I've been pretty experienced with Zoom, even though things have improved with the safety pieces of it, thankfully. So my response was like, okay, we got a grant for this performance series, which was gonna be 3 performances. And I don't want to cancel because the artists need to get paid. And a lot of people were canceling events and performances. And then that is awful because artists and people who are vulnerable in this space and rely on freelance income need that as well. So I decided to just, pivot. We're going to use Zoom. I contacted the artists, really tested out with them. Do you feel comfortable taking this on? Do you want to keep the same date? Do you want to push out a little bit? Would you join me in this experiment of doing some kind of virtual theater experience? And most folks said yes. There were a few people, like about 3 artists. And just to give context, so again, each performance would be 12 artists. And Luna Loa at this point is a group of about 90 artists who have performed. So these are the people that I email and then I create lineups with. So the artists responded yes. Some folks had to bow out because they couldn't, they were taking care of their families and themselves emotionally and spiritually, which was really necessary. But most of the artists wanted to take on thinking about their practice in a different way. So we decided to do that. We used Zoom. I contacted each and every artist before the performance, and we agreed that it would be 1 out of 3 things: either send a video of past work or film a new video in your home, low key, low maintenance, iPhones totally fine, or smartphones fine. Or you could do a live performance, which is better for, like, for example, musicians and poets. So yeah, that's what we did. We created 2 digital virtual theaters that were amazing. It went really well. Some of the artists pushed and experimented with a new creative medium. Some of them were shy about it, and it took a little bit of hand holding, but everyone was like pretty amazing, and the work that came out was beautiful. And last thing I'll share is that, well, 2 things, which you'll find in the toolkit too. So we increased our audiences. Obviously, as many of us doing now virtual events are finding that we can, I know many people have done this before, but it's like, wow, you reach 300 people instead of 60. You reach people all over the world instead of your tiny town. So that was really great, especially for the artists. And lastly, since the performances, we got a grant for live performances. Even though the State Council for the Arts, which is the entity that gave us the grant, was pretty flexible, we kept it. We kept the performances, but we had to do an individual donor kind of small fundraiser to complete the funding to have the artist fees all in place. So we did that. It worked out really well, and it helped us amplify the work more and people felt like they were supporting artists directly. Last bit around that, internally as a group, we mobilize because it's not just a circle of people performing, it's a circle of people that share resources. So a call out was put to the artists that were in a better financial space and ask if they wanted to support another artist. And this actually came out because a couple of people reached out to me and asked how they could support, and other artists also reached out to me saying how much they appreciated the stipend because of their financial situation. So that turned into sort of small scale relief fund where some artists pulled in money. They sent it to me, I repackaged it and sent it to the artists that identified themselves as needing support for now. So we supported 6 artists at a small scale, but $200 is a big deal and a really good support for some people. So that's it for me. Any questions are really welcome. And thank you for the space.
Yeah, thank you so much for telling your story, for the toolkit. I think, yeah, you were like one of the first, Luna Loba was one of the first activities that I saw really moving online, and it was really exciting. So I don't see any questions yet from the audience. Oh, wait, nope. Oh, sorry. Still learning how to use Zoom here. But I have some questions. I think, first of all, it would be really great for people to know, like, if they are planning to move a collective performance like this to an online venue and they've never done it before, what should they be thinking about? What should they be thinking about, like, with talking to the artists and with planning and with tech? Just give us all your knowledge with that.
Thank you. That's a great question. Well, first off is flexibility more than anything, and patience, and not imposing anything on anyone. So really checking in with the artist. What do they feel comfortable? How do they want to engage with this new virtual space is really important, and let them give you, I don't know if the word is feedback, but some insight before that can inform how you create the event. And it really takes a more intentional facilitation. That's something that I discovered, like being in the midst of this. One thing is being the host and facilitator of a physical space while also taking care of artists in a physical space. And this kind of virtual facilitation, I feel, requires much more focus. And I don't know, I wouldn't say intention, because you need intention for both formats, but it really requires like a really focused kind of energy in a different way. I would say if people send you things at the last minute, don't freak out. Just flow, and whatever happens, happens. Because I think that one of the things that made it really great was that I was like, whatever happens, happens. Let's just test it out. And I think that removes some of the tension or some of the stress of folks that, for example, are trying to figure out this new medium or how to pivot and use digital technology, whereas their creative practice is analog. So that's one of the things.
Well, and actually we have a couple of questions now, and we are running about 5 minutes behind. So we have about 4 minutes left with you, Shey. So let's see, here's a question. How do you think this adaptation will help shape and inspire the Luna Loba event moving forward?
That's an awesome question. I am still unpacking that and still want to think through it, because I do think it opened up another level of possibility, whether if and when, well, I won't say if, when live performances are able to happen again, then still retaining well-curated virtual element to it so that folks can still access the performance in a different way, for sure. And also I'm thinking, well, maybe I can have the live performances happen less often and then have some virtual ones happen in between. So there's a variety of formats and ways in which people are engaging. So that's an awesome question, and I'm gonna keep it in my mind more, but those are some of the things that have come up for me.
I really love that. And I think that's something that we're all thinking about with our work too, is like, you know, what are the good things that are coming out of this that we're going to bring over to the other side? So one more question, and then we're going to move on. How did you organize all of the performances into one Zoom? How did it pass from artist to artist?
Perfect. Awesome question. So this might seem a little bit like low tech maybe or geeky, but I use PowerPoint. So I found the flaws and virtues of that. So I'll share that. So what I've been doing in the live performances, I tend to collect a lot of the media beforehand. So audio, images for projection or video. I put them up in a PowerPoint. That's what I've been using. Some real theaters have a software program where they just put everything and like have fancy things to cue. I don't have that, but it's all good. And then so for the virtual performances, I did use PowerPoint. And it worked out great because I treated it exactly as I would a live performance, like land acknowledgement, introduction, making sure audience feels comfortable, stretched out, and then one by one show the artist pieces, say their name, show a piece, say their name, show their piece. And then have some moments for people to like see each other face to face. For folks that were performing live, I had prepared them before. So basically what I would do was like, I would stop my share screen and then switch to them. So it wouldn't be like this, that it's a panelist mode. It would just be an open meeting because there's too many artists, it's 12. And also like it gives more flexibility, at least in that series' context. So I would just stop sharing my screen. I would give them permission to share their screen and then they would perform. The last thing, there was one more thing I wanted to say. I think that was about it, I think.
All right, and actually, I love this question that just came from Janata, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it. If you're comfortable with this question, what's your astrological sign and how has it impacted your process? And that's a question that can go to every panelist as they go as well. Thank you, Janata, for that.
Oh my God, Janata, you have my heart. I've been waiting for somebody to ask me. Which one do you think? I'm an Aries.
I already know.
So I was gonna say it when Candida asked, like, you know, you responded really quickly. And I was like, I think I was like really channeling the fire energy there, being like, okay, what do we do? So I'm an Aries for sure. Thank you very much for the question. What was the rest of the question?
How did being an Aries impact that process? And you kind of already said that. I mean, yeah, Aries got this pandemic for sure.
Yeah, thank you. So part of that is I'm a Virgo moon. So I got all my ducks in a row. I like spreadsheets. I keep everyone like all the details together. So the Aries energy worked well to like really pivot and, you know, take the floor and rally people into asking if they want to do a thing and getting it moving. And then the Virgo moon worked for me to organize all the elements so that everyone had what they needed and that I had what I needed to create this. The last thing I'll say is that Zoom is not good for showing video. If you show video and share it, just be mindful that the quality won't be great. So that's something that I found doing the series. And I'm trying to think about other platforms that might be out there, or maybe just like this is a good thing for some folks to, you know, create, but it is hard to show video, share screen, and keep the high quality of the video. Thank you for those questions.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I know this is a really short time. The link to Luna Loba was put in the chat. Shey, if you also want to put links to your social media so people can follow you and see what you're doing, but thank you for all of that information.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna move on now to Kathy Muchapau. So Kathy joined the MRAC staff in June 2018 as the executive director of the organization here in the Twin Cities, Minnesota. Kathy embodies a deep community engagement and a career in leadership. She has been an MRAC applicant, panelist, and board member, and assumed the role ready to maintain the work of the organization, as well as addressing the future aspirations and efforts to expand the community impact of MRAC. Most recently, Kathy served as a program officer for creative placemaking with the Twin Cities Local Initiative Support Corporation, TC-LISC. And before that, she served as the executive director of the Center for Hmong Arts and Talent, CHAT. She was a 2016 Roy Wilkins Fellow and a 2011 Bush Leadership Fellow. Currently, she's a member of the Minnesota Citizens for the Arts Board, the St. Paul Planning Commission, and the Coalition of Asian American Leaders. Kathy uses she, her pronouns. And Kathy and MRAC is featured in the toolkit, mostly for their work that they did with changing up the Next Step Fund. And so I invite Kathy to speak about that and anything else that you have been doing or that MRAC has been doing. And again, people go ahead and drop questions in the chat. Welcome, Kathy. Oh, Kathy.
There we go. Okay, thank you. So Shey, I actually graduated from Hope High School in Providence, but I was only there for 1 year. So it's kind of cool to have, to be sharing this Zoom space with you, with somebody from Providence. And thank you, Candida, and the rest of the Forecast crew for inviting us. You know, when we made these decisions around the Next Step Fund, we didn't really realize we were being innovative, or that was definitely not the driving force of it. It felt like we needed to do something quickly, and our kind of traditional path just didn't feel right. So the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council, we are a part of a statewide grant making system. So in the state of Minnesota, we have a fund called the Legacy Fund, where the revenues from tax sales goes into this fund, and a portion of that goes into the arts. So throughout the entire state of Minnesota, we are made up of 11 different regions, and each region has a regional arts council that makes grants for mostly for small arts organizations. We also have a state agency called the Minnesota State Arts Board, and we work in partnership with them. So MRAC, so Metropolitan Regional Arts Council, is also known as MRAC. I'm just going to refer to it as that because it's just easier to say. So MRAC is, you know, the region that we work in is the metro region, which makes up about 3.5% of the state, but is home to 55% of the state's population. So we have like a very small portion of the state, but it's really dense. So we provide, so previously, and there are going to be big changes coming up in FY21, primarily because of the pandemic, but you know, some changes that have been in the works for a while. We had about 9 different programs, and we did grants of up to $10,000 for small arts and culture organizations or fiscally sponsored arts and culture groups, and then individual artists. So the program that Candida has asked me to talk about is our Next Step Fund. And that program is our only program that is dedicated to individual artists and is actually funded through the McKnight Foundation. So that's the only program that's not state funded. This is our largest program. It is, like I said, the only program that we have for individual artists, and it is up to $5,000 for individual artists to take the next step in their artistic career. And that could be anything from buying new equipment to traveling to a homeland, or working with a master artist, or it can be a number of different things. You just have to, as an applicant, you just have to be able to share your story and be able to talk about how these resources would help you move to the next step, and you can decide what that is. So this program, we see about 500 applications a year, which, like I said, is our largest program, but we only fund 36 applicants. And so it's only got about a 7% success rate. And it is a multi-phased process. So you apply, so we don't make the decisions in-house. We actually contract with other artists in the community to read through the applications and to help us make the decisions. So the first round, they'll read like maybe 100. they'll read many applications and they'll score them. And then we get that down to about 72 finalists. Once we get the finalists, they then submit work samples, and the panelists then determine, you know, based on the work samples, based on their application, and a full day of deliberation with each other, who the 36 grantees will be. We had done everything up until the finalists before the pandemic started. And when the pandemic began, we were right at that phase where we were going to ask artists for work samples, which means that of the 72, we were going to have to deny 36. And this is always the hardest part of our jobs, is having to tell people that, you know, that they're not going to get funded. It doesn't matter if it's in our Next Step Fund or our other programs. We acknowledge that, you know, writing a grant takes time, it takes energy. It's an emotional labor. And so it's always hard to let people know that they haven't been selected. So I can't really take credit for this, but Bethany Whitehead, who's our program director for Next Step Fund, came to me with a full proposal about why we should fund all 72 finalists and why we should not move forward with asking for work samples and having the panelists, you know, dwindle it down to 36. And so, I mean, you know, she really did come to me with a full proposal. She had me at like, I don't want to tell anybody they're not going to get funded. You know, that was like the first sentence. And so we just decided that rather than going through with that last phase, we would fund all 72 artists, $2,500 instead of 36 artists with the $5,000. So that was great. You know, it was a fun, exciting time for us to be able to let all of them know that they made it. You know, I'll be honest, I think there were some folks that felt like it was the best thing. And then I think there were some folks that really wanted that full 5,000, right? And I think that the way we thought about it was that for some artists, not getting the full, well, first of all, it guaranteed everybody funding. I think that was the most important part. It guaranteed everybody funding. The second part of it was that, you know, for folks that did not get the full $5,000 to successfully accomplish their projects, you know, this was kind of a no strings attached. So you get the $2,500. If it allows you to do part of your project, great. If it just allows you to eat and, you know, pay your rent, fine. You know, it just really was meant to provide some relief for artists during this pandemic. So with that, and then we also did something similar for organizations, because that's really part of our core constituents. We created an emergency relief fund where organizations could apply for up to $2,500 for relief.
Yeah, this is awesome. So actually, clarity, I did receive one of these Next Step grants. And when I got that email, I was like blown away. I was like, wow, like I'm watching all these funders pull funding, and here's this funder that said like, oop, let's just change it up. And, you know, you guys need to eat and pay your rent. Here you go. It was really amazing to see. We have a question here. So did you face challenges justifying the all-in approach with funding sources at the state level? How did you respond?
Yeah, so again, just to clarify, Next Step Fund, which is our individual artist fund, is funded by the McKnight Foundation. And they had already reached out to us ahead of time too and said, you know, be as flexible as you have to be with that fund. So that was super easy. With the state, you know what, it wasn't as hard as it has been in the past. I'll say one of the kind of like bright stars in all of this darkness is that we are finding that what was impossible before is definitely possible now. I think that everybody in the world is experiencing some collective trauma, and everybody in the world is looking for ways to get through this. And so there was actually encouragement there are some things that are written into law that we are still waiting. We're advocating for the board and for the governor and the legislature to kind of help us get through, and that's like extensions. So we get our money every 2 years in a biennium, just like the governor's and the state's budget. And the money has to be spent in that block of time. So we're asking for extensions because everybody had to cancel their projects. Everybody is trying to figure out how to offer the arts, how to stay connected with their audiences, how to stay socially connected when we can't be physically connected. You know, basically everything that Shey just presented about. So there are some things where there's less flexibility because it's public dollars and because things are actually written into law. But in regards to our emergency relief fund, you know, $2,500, we were actually encouraged to be flexible as we can be.
Great. All right, and we just have a couple of minutes left, and there's one more question that just came in. So the comment is, it's really amazing how flexible funders and other people can be when there is a really good reason. How do we incentivize the same kind of flexibility when it isn't a worldwide emergency? Great question, Kathy.
I mean, well, what I would say is that, you know, MRAC, we've been, for about the last 5 years or so, we've been on a trajectory of really looking at disparities in our grant making in the system, and working towards creating a more equitable system, particularly looking at BIPOC groups, people with disabilities, groups that are in some of our more rural communities, to really think about and ask ourselves about what is it in our system that is really creating barriers, you know, for everybody to have access. So I will say that, again, like I said, I think this is the bright star in a dark sky, is that you know, we don't want to make the same mistakes we made before. I think that this is really an opportunity to really be bold about how we want to engage, interact, and support the community. I just think that this is the time to not make the same mistakes. And so this is the time to really, I mean, I'll just say too, there's no such thing as going back to the way things were. I think this idea of opening up the economy, you know, this idea of just sending people back to work and increasing health risks is not the answer. We just have to be more creative about how we will return to any kind of like social society. And I also believe that artists and creative minds, I mean, artists are the creative minds that are really necessary for kind of helping us think through what recovery will look like and what the new kind of world will look like. So I think in terms of incentivizing, you know, I just think that like there's no excuse to make the same mistakes we've been making in the past, right? There's no excuse for that. I think there's a quote out there like, let's not waste this crisis. Let's be creative. Let's do the things that we've always wanted to do, but you know, for whatever reasons didn't do. And so I'm really looking forward to figuring out with our community here, like how we can accomplish that.
I could just listen to you talk about change in the arts forever. I have followed the work that you've been doing at MRAC since you got there, and you know, like Kathy for Arts President of the World.
Oh my goodness.
we don't have time to ask the astrological question because we're already running behind. But if you want to drop that in the chat, you can go ahead and do that. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to pass it over to my co-host, Hawona, for the next couple of artists.
Hello, that was amazing. And I just feel a really strong need to know Kathy's sign. So I'm just waiting for her to drop that in the box down there. This stuff is important. So I'm Hawona Sullivan Janzen, and I'm going to have Robin Hickman-Winfield join us in just a minute. So I am going to invite her to start her camera. Let's see. There we go. Hi, Robin. Okay, I'm going to do an introduction and then we're going to start a conversation. So Robin Hickman-Winfield is the CEO and executive producer of Soul Touch Production, a television and film production, youth mentorship, and media consulting company. The mission of which is to make meaningful media and produce powerful social impact experiences. You may know her from the incredible consulting work that she does, bringing people together. She is known nationally, though, for her work creating vignettes using dolls of color that she designs and creates herself. And you can check out that work on Facebook and Instagram. She is also the niece of the late Gordon Parks, who is a phenomenal photographer known around the world. And so she recently curated not one, but 2 exhibits at the Minnesota Museum of American Art on Gordon Parks. And so she's joining us today to talk about the exhibits that she did at the M, but she's also going to, I hope, give us a little bit of treat and share some of her gorgeous soulful doll works with us as well. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you so much. Regarding this time that we find ourselves in, the Creator brought to my spirit today, we must retreat in order to reset for renewal. That is just kind of what I'm kind of walking in right now. It's so great to be here. I heard it once said that artists are the modern day prophets. I truly believe in that. I was raised to know this. Being so considerate of time is an honor. Hawona, thank you so much. I am surrounded by my art.
Yay!
Yes, the soul here with me. Because I was a woman of faith. Definitely my faith has brought me through. My amazing husband, I am still a newlywed, but it has been my art and being able to create has really brought me through this time. Envisioning a choice of weapons, honor and dignity, the visions of Gordon Parks and Jamel Shabazz. It's an intergenerational exhibit which lifts up honor and dignity as a weapon to heal, as a weapon to celebrate the love, images, the resilience, the hope, and the faith of a people for such a time as this. Gordon Parks was my great uncle, but he is an artist and humanitarian that was the first in many genres. First Black photographer for Life magazine, first African-American to direct a feature Hollywood film, first in many aspects. What people do not know is that he had, as a humanitarian, just such a deep love and concern for generations of African-American youth who now find themselves in for such a time as this, as we watch the news and we see the narratives, such a concern. My last visit with my uncle, I spent so much time with him growing up and followed in his footsteps as a media maker. My last visit with my uncle before he died, with tears in his eyes, he said, "Baby, what is going to happen to Black boys? What did I really do?" So with all of the grandeur of his life as a Renaissance man, his concern was, do they have it any better than I had it as a young Black man walking the streets of St. Paul, Minnesota, homeless, fighting poverty, racism, violence? And so he wanted to know that his life and legacy matter. So my promise to him is that his living would not be in vain. And so having an opportunity to meet the amazing photographer and humanitarian Jamel Shabazz from Brooklyn, who also walked in Uncle Gordon's footsteps, also a humanitarian, I knew to bring these two amazing men together in an exhibit that would lift up something that is so needed for such a time as this. To be able to do that and to do it in a way that could, in the words of James Baldwin, bring lovers of humanity together to heal. So we were able to do this with the M. I served on the board of directors with Hawona, and I served with the board for 6 years, but to see the vision become a reality and to set the tone for 2020 with the exhibit that opened. An additional part of the exhibit celebrates Uncle Gordon's work with a Spokesman Recorder newspaper, where he worked as a young man, but it also celebrates his fashion with Black and brown girls recreating his fashion from the 40s.
Right. Now that was amazing. So so many people may not know Gordon Parks' background as having been a fashion photographer early in his work. And so, yes.
But he started his fashion photography here in St. Paul. So these beautiful girls, a part of Loving the Skin of Men at Gordon Parks High School, who, in working with Frank Murphy's store where Uncle Gordon started in 1940, recreated his fashions, and that is also part of the exhibit. So that installment was celebrated a week before the lockdown, a week before stay home. Okay, so young women who did not get to go to the prom, did get to celebrate their beauty and take their rightful place on the walls of the M. So it was amazing. Now, what did we have an opportunity to do? And then I'm going to hush. We had an opportunity to produce a virtual tour of A Choice of Weapons, Honoring Dignity, and A Choice of Weapons, Elegance and Grace for the world to experience.
And so where can people see that?
Going to the M, Minnesota Museum of American Art, so mmaa.org. Okay. But we were also able to work with St. Paul Public Schools and teachers to develop a curriculum around the virtual tour to use in trying to find ways to get our young people engaged in this distance learning. It is a challenge for our young people of color to connect with this process. And too many of them are not doing it. I teach at Gordon Parks High School, and we are very, very, very concerned with the number of our young people who are not going to get their credits, who are not going to graduate. And so we have work to do, but I am very, the highlight of this, and I will hush and take questions, is that we engage students from Gordon Parks High School, our scholars, in the process of curating the exhibit, and they wrote the text for the photography in the exhibit. So their names and their words are on the wall of the Minnesota Museum of American Art. So that
is really gorgeous. I want to say it's really gorgeous. So
that's keeping the promise to Uncle Gordon. So in answering the question, Uncle Gordon, they will be okay. They will take their rightful places in a museum, lifting you up.
And so first of all, I want to say how impressed I was with how thoughtful and gorgeous the exhibit itself was, but the work that was done behind it, the bringing in youth and getting them involved in the work, the developing the curriculum for St. Paul Public Schools is all really amazing stuff. But I wasn't surprised because I have seen your own work, and I've seen how the work that you have done in the community with dolls, helping to transform narratives for people across cultures, across gender identities, across language. It's really quite amazing work. I'm going to invite folks to ask some questions now, and while we're sitting here. But one thing I want to say is, when I called you up and asked you about doing this, one of the things that you said to me was that this was not something that came down as an edict from someone else. It was an idea that came to you in the days after the governor had announced that the state was going to be shutting down. And so you worked with the team at the Minnesota Museum of American Art to create this virtual tour so that the opportunity wouldn't be lost for people who were not going to have a chance to go in the door. And did you hire a big camera crew? Did you have makeup? Was it an elaborate staging?
Oh, no. And I think that's what's important. It was very, very simple. One of the staff members used his sophisticated smartphone, not a lot of lighting. I think it was the soul of the exhibit, the soul of my colleagues at the M, and we just knew we needed to do it. The exhibit will be extended once the museum opens, okay. So that's great. So whenever people are able to come back in person, but it was just the soul of the whole experience, the authenticity of it. But we just knew we needed to do it. I spoke with Jamel Shabazz a long time today, and people are tapping into it. Again, we can't, as I heard from some of the other sisters, the opportunity and the possibilities for people around the world right now needs healing. The world right now needs to hear from the modern day prophets and who are supporting other artists and visionaries. So I think, this is maybe the blessing in this is when we can take it virtual.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. I wish we had more time. I want to first check and see if we have any other questions. I did see in my comments box, yay, I love Soulful Dolls. So that's someone talking about your own work there and how much they love the creations that you make. And will you drop in the chat box information? So I know, I think we can drop it in there, your Instagram and your Facebook, so people can see your other work?
I sure will. I will just say too, artists, as we create the artistry that heals, let's make sure that we are healed as well. It's so important. I'm still getting used to this technology, so I'm looking every which way. My heart is heavy right now. We see it on the news, who's suffering seriously in all of this. My heart is heavy, so artists, remember, get yours too. Get your healing on too. Thank you so much, Hawona.
Wait, we've got one last question. Well, actually, of course, we have the zodiac question. Do you know what your zodiac sign is?
I'm a Pisces.
Pisces, excellent. And someone asked the question, they said they've been following your work for a while, and they're wondering if you've noticed an increase in people engaging with your Soulful Doll work online since the shutdown.
Oh my goodness. Well, yes. And again, Hawona, who has so loved the Soulful Dolls and has had 2 exhibits at UROC. So she is a godmother. Absolutely, I hear from people all over the world who say they look forward to every day coming to see the Soulful Dolls because they need them, that the dolls heal them, they take them back to a place. So I've gone from doing portraits to having more times to do sets, and I've created the Robin living room, and I now have time to write stories. So people tap in. And so I want to take it to the next level. It heals me, it brings me peace. And I'm always so honored to hear from people who share that it brings them peace and joy. And we need that. So I'm loving it. And I'll be glad to put it in there. And anybody can help me take it to the next level. I welcome that. I want it. I want to share this.
There's a chat box. Just drop it in there if anybody's ready. The last question was actually from someone who just wanted to know if we had any suggestions for virtual small museum tours. And I will say that in addition to Robin's tour of that exhibit, the museum that she referenced, that's at mmaa.org, has created something called the M at Home. Michael, and if you go to their website, you can see information on some of their other programming. And like a lot of other places, they have added some adaptations like coloring sheets and different things that folks can use at home.
There are a lot of companion pieces to the tour. There are resource videos and books, resource lists, much more you can learn about Jamel Shabazz, Gordon Parks, there's so much there. This is the time to engage. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for stopping by and joining us, and looking forward to going back and watching the video again and checking out your work on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
All right, so our next artist is Kathy McTavish. Hello, Kathy.
Hello.
Lovely to see you. And this is maybe a little bit of a cheat because Kathy and I actually recently worked together on a project, and I've invited her to come and talk about it. But first I want to give Kathy an introduction. So let me click on this and bring up her bio so I can share with you. So Kathy McTavish is a media composer and installation artist. In live performance, installation, and online environments, she blends found sound, text, data, and abstract layered moving images. She uses generative methods for building networked multi-channel video and sound environments, cross-sensory landscapes which flow from the digital web into physical spaces. Her current work explores the porous, intimate boundaries between humans and machines, the erotic dynamics of tapping glass, the carbon cycle, the cyborg body, the fragile electric body, the resistance cyborg, the networked digital hive mind, and the swarm. So I'm not sure we need to say anything else. I think we've said it all in just your introduction there, Kathy, but thank you for joining us. And today I want to talk to you about two projects, actually. I want to talk to you about a Coming Together, which was the 638-hour-long online exhibit that you and I did together. But I also want you to put a plug in for your billboard, the electronic billboard you recently did in downtown Minneapolis, which is something else because Kathy is actually based in Duluth, Minnesota, but was invited by the Hennepin Theater Trust to do a billboard in Minneapolis. So will you talk about a Coming Together and about the billboard with us?
Yeah, and first of all, can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Okay. Thank you so much to Forecast. Thanks for all the work that Forecast does for our community, and thanks to all the panelists. Robin, thank you so much. I relate so much to what she was saying, and I saw those two exhibits actually before everything shut down, thank God. And I grew up in St. Paul, actually, so Gordon Park's work is special to me. But I've been thinking so much about technology and about, now we're living in Zoom world so much of the time. And I was thinking so much about, like when I was at that exhibit, and I saw someone like Gordon Park's work, for example, there's this photograph. It's lasted for decades. So that technology has been with us for decades. You can dwell in one photograph. You could just stay there in front of one photograph, for hours, really. There's so much happening in that photograph. And now we're all part of moving images, Zoom. We have so much technology that's coming at us all the time. And I've been thinking so much about, too, Robin was mentioning about retreat. Like I feel so much stress right now. Just saw my 80-some-year-old parents. I just feel, there's just so much stress, and it's hard to know what are we called to do in this time. And it's hard to live in this perpetual uncertainty, right? So it's like we're in this nowness, we can't see forward. Everything, if you look back 2 weeks, it's completely shifted from underneath our feet. And I've just been thinking so much about slow time, about dwelling, about like if we just take a moment, like I've been gardening because who knows, I just have some food, right? Just taking slow time, and I just feel like whatever we do, whatever we're called to do, it might be not visible to the whole world right away. I think we're so used to just putting it out there, but it might be it might come, it might be like 38 years down the road that that we finally understood what happened to us, right, in this moment. And I love what Robin was saying. And so about the project that we worked on, I was lucky to work with you on. Hawona and I were asked to be artists at this fundraiser for Northern Lights.mn, which is an organization based out of Minneapolis that does a lot of community building work. It's an arts organization that has supported both of our work in the past. And so we were invited, Hawona was commissioned to create a poem that she was going to also read at this evening. It's an annual fundraiser. It's called the Spring Howl. It's a big party. And so she was going to read it. This was going to happen at the end of March. So Hawona had written, I believe, this poem for that particular idea of an event. And then I was going to do a multi-channel projection, sound, and installation in that space for one evening. And tickets have been sold. And it was like early March, and it became really clear that, so we're in Minnesota, just to give you sort of a timeline, a COVID timeline. It was just starting to really, we were just starting to understand what it was going to mean for us and for our public events. And so we were particularly working with two women at Northern Lights, Sarah Peters and Tyra Payer. And so the four of us just started talking about, like, the ground is shifting under our feet, and we can either wait, just put off a decision and then just have to cancel probably this event, or we can try to be fluid in this moment. Like, what can we put on the table? So what can we rethink this together? So we spent like a lot of conversations trying to just brainstorm our way around this. Like, what do we have that we can bring to this moment? And if just, no holds barred, what do we want to bring to this moment? And at first it was things that might take like months, and we had 2 weeks. So, so it was, for me, that it was such a gift, because it's so hard to know. It was so hard to understand what was even happening. It was so hard to know as an artist what your relevance was in the moment, how to shift, how to be fluid, how to be open.
Right, but it wasn't Northern Lights.mn that came to you and said, hey, what should we do? It was you who reached out to their director, right, to Sarah, and said what?
Well, it just occurred to me that, is there some way that we can shift this? Because I feel like that we have a community that wants to support the organization. So they're not wed to the fact that they're going to come to a party necessarily, right? They want to support the organization. Is there some other way that we can be of service, that we can still be kind of serve that spirit, that need, to raise funds, but at the same time, is there some way that we can actually, I feel like as artists, like, it's our job to listen to the times, like to be witnesses, right? So to provide a witness, to be willing to be vulnerable and awkward and to make mistakes, but to just ignore the times, that's right. I felt like we had to shift, we had to be fluid, and then I knew Hawona, I knew your work, and I love your work, and I feel like I just felt like all of us, we were creative people that we could bend together, and it was a gift to be able to think through the moment together, so I felt like we held each other, and there was a lot of trust in the room for just taking a chance and trying to move forward into something new. And so Hawona, you so as a poet, you pivoted and you changed the written work, which became kind of this core, kind of the seed for the whole project. But I was aware of the performance work that you had done for Naked Stages in Minneapolis, based out of Pillsbury. So you did a performance earlier in the year. So you're a poet in kind of the broadest sense of that word. And so I know you had worked with musicians, and I knew that performance piece that you also gave me a video to look at, to the documentation of it. But I knew that you were really you were used to working in these very multidimensional spaces, right? And so
Right.
I work with web technologies. We thought, is there some way we can move this performance so we could just put like the poem, that's it? But is there some way that we can think through this, turn this into an opportunity to reach out in a different form. And you and I had never met each other. We hadn't worked together. But for me, it was a real gift to be able to have this opportunity to work with you. And so seeing that Naked Stages work, I knew that we could move this into, so your words would move into this other environment that might be multi-threaded, you know, more collage-like. And so you wrote this, you wrote a poem that was addressing the time, which was very moving to work with, because I worked with those words then over and over again for
right. And then
hours.
you asked me to do a few recordings of the poem that I wrote. And then you created a really stunning soundscape and landscape. And so I want to be sure that people go to your website, because if they go to your website, they can at least begin kind of to understand this. Your work, your digital work is like nothing I've ever seen before. And so unfortunately, the project was, because it was a fundraiser, you needed to purchase a ticket for it to go. And then it was online, constantly changing for 638 hours. So basically almost the entirety of the month of April, National Poetry Month. And so it was like this 638-hour long performance. And so I want to point out that this was something that you were initially trying to create these visual elements for a 2-hour long event. And through reaching out to the organizers of the event and then having them connect you and I, we essentially collaborated to create an entirely new piece of work that would not have existed had it not been for the pandemic. And so I wanted to have you on to talk about that, because I want artists so often think when they're working on commissions or grants or other things, that it's either what the original idea was or I've lost out.
Yeah.
And so I just want to say how much I appreciate you reaching out to the funder at that point and suggesting something different and feeling comfort in producing this other piece of work that was very different than what you had. I want to invite folks to drop a question in the chat box, but of course, following in the tradition of Janada's initial question, Kathy, will you tell us your zodiac sign?
I am a Leo.
Excellent. I am a Virgo. I didn't think to tell you that before. Does anyone have a question for Kathy? Let's see if anybody drops anything in the box. You can see her website is now visible.
Hawona, is that video that's going to be made public, right? I wonder if I should drop that link in. Should I put that link in?
It will be made public. You can, if you'd like. This is a Vimeo recording, yeah.
This is like a screen recording of some of the event.
Of parts of it, yeah. So I have a question here that says, how did you do a 638-hour online performance?
So my work is, I work with web technologies and I do generative work. So I created a code base that would keep using fragments of Hawona's sound. So she had recorded both in a whispered voice and a spoken voice, and also the text itself. And she had written a poem where each of the individual lines could be independent as well. So we created kind of a code base that would actually weave for the entire month of April. And April just happened to be National Poetry Month as well. So we wanted to kind of, and the poets, I feel like they get us through these historic times. So that was, it was just kind of a nice synergy with National Poetry Month. And so I felt like the code was actually reading the work very actively for that, 24/7 for the month of April. So it was reading not only the lines, but the whole text, and the whole text was available there. And then it was also like particularly hearing the consonants and the vowels that were involved. So it would break things, into small particles of sound. And so it was because it was code based that it just kept doing this weaving. And that felt somehow important, that it was just still living. It was always living for that entire month. So it just kept reading, almost like a prayer, right? So it's just do it. And so that felt important to me.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us, Kathy. Time is so precious, and we have one more artist that we want to hear from. But I'm encouraging folks to check Kathy's website so you can see that. And then she just dropped a link in for a short, very much more abbreviated, not 638-hour long video link that she's posted on Vimeo, so you can check out some of Coming Together. Thank you for joining us. And now I'm going to turn it back to Candida, who's going to share a conversation with our last artist. Thank you.
Thank you, Hawona. So we have the pleasure of having Janata Petrus Nassar here. Janata, are you back with us? You are?
Yeah,
Okay.
I am.
Yay, hello.
I never left. I just didn't want to have my face there reacting in case I didn't anyway.
Yeah, I meant video wise. I am going to start out by reading a little bit of Janata's bio. So Janata Petrus Nassar is a creative activist, writer, playwright, and multidimensional performance artist who is Minneapolis born, West Indian descended, and African sourced. Her work centers around Black wildness, futurism, ancestral healing, sweetness, spectacle, and shimmer. Petrus Nassar has written works for the stage, screen, and page, employing poetics and experiences remembered via ancestral dreaming and research of their lost stories. She's inspired by her parents and ancestors who immigrated from the Caribbean, bringing their magic and trauma with them, and her art ripples with their legacy. She's influenced by the Middle Passage and diaspora, Black folks in Minneapolis, ancestral magic, and stories of queerness and womanhood within these contexts. Speculative fiction and magical realist elements are central to her work. And we have Janata here to talk a bit today about the work that she has done with Free Black Dirt and Heart of the Beast. The project that was featured in the toolkit was this Chrysalis May Day celebration. And I'll say no more about it. I will just turn it over to you.
Yeah, Candida, thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you everyone who went before me, and for all of the dope, like adaptive, generative, emergent work you're doing, and being able to, like, you know, channel so much power in this moment and so much care, honestly, and attending to artists. So the work that I've been doing for the last couple of months, actually, or I would say close to a year, with the Heart of the Beast Theater has really been in, like, how do we steward a process of transformation from an organization that has been largely, you know, puppet work, and the May Day parade and festival, which has been, like, very central to that work, has also been unsustainable, has also struggled with having Indigenous, Black, and POC artists feel welcomed at the table in a way that's not culturally appropriative or tokenized. And I mean, on so many levels, there's ways that this wonderful, beautiful, beloved community event that's still so magical and transcendent, like, I think I called it, what did I call it? A glow up, or orgasm, like a community orgasm in Puerto this really sort of magical event that I grew up going to, that, like, is a place for kind of like weird Southsiders to gather. And I don't know, should I talk a little bit about what the May Day Parade and Festival is and what it has been traditionally? I don't want to assume that everybody knows. So anyways, it's this mask and puppet festival and like parade extravaganza that happens in South Minneapolis every year. It's been going on for 45 years. And it really is sort of like a South Side, you know, dream that happens on the first Sunday of May. And sort of the ethos of it is bringing in this aspect of, like, spiritual connection to, like, this, you know, springtime, as well as an aspect of social justice. So some of the challenges, though, is that the organization has been largely white-led. And all of this is speaking to kind of like the place that we found ourselves in this year. So anyhow, like, after a consulting group did an assessment of the organization last year, helping them process like what are the proper sort of next steps to actually have this May Day parade, plus the Heart of the Beast Theater that puts it on. Like, what are the next steps in their evolution? And they felt central to that was to take a pause for a year from the parade and actually do all of this healing sort of community work. So part of that included creating a council, a May Day council of community members of all kinds of intersections with South Minneapolis, with May Day, with the business community, artists, activists, a lot of queer-bodied people, a lot of sort of people who are Indigenous, people who are Black, POC, like people who have not been at the table in a lot of serious ways over the last however many years. Now we're kind of sitting at this table to reimagine what the next vision of it would be. So in this year of pause and chrysalis, which is a thing we were already calling the May Day sort of honoring this year. Instead of doing a parade and festival, we wanted to honor a chrysalis where we were reflective, where we didn't do sort of the big, bombastic, energetic work that it takes to put on a parade. It takes hours and hours and hours of building and making and designing and community engagement. And it's just like totally exhausting. I've been a May Day artist for 3 years. And as a Black artist, as a queer artist, I really did a lot of work around engaging community to come into a space that in a lot of ways was a very white space, a very white liberal space, but very like, had a lot of microaggressions. So anyway, this year we were like, yo, we're gonna take the pause, we're gonna do some healing work, talk about cultural appropriation, talk about tokenism, and we're gonna not do no parade, y'all. Like, can y'all like just let that marinate? And when I say a lot of these white folks couldn't accept it, they couldn't accept that the work of actually doing community, like healing and engagement required a pause. Like there was a lot of resistance, both like, you know, in kind of like that petty social media gossipy way. There was a whole other delegation of people who were like, forget y'all, we finna do a parade, okay? And we gonna build our own stuff. And like, it just got really immature. And, you know, Candida actually is a part of the May Day Council. A lot of the thing was like, all right, like, how are we gonna handle this? And a lot of people were like, we're not gonna get caught up. We're gonna stay committed to the work we're here to do. We're gonna like hold space for healing. We're gonna hold space for transformation. And then guess what happened? COVID happened. So all of this stuff that like we'd really been like, yo, we need y'all to listen, we need y'all to chill. People were like, no, we're gonna build puppets. There's gonna be a parade. Nobody owns this parade. We coming out here with these puppets. Like, I mean, I don't get it. But like we were like, really? Like y'all don't understand how necessary it is to actually deal with like whiteness. And this is like totally the, you know what I mean? Like the point, like y'all act like this. This is why we got to deal with this work. So anyways, COVID happened. And then we were like, okay, then everything got silent. Everybody started to listen. I mean, not listen, but like all of a sudden everybody was having to take care of stuff and the world was in chrysalis. We were like, hey, we need this chrysalis May Day where everybody chills. And then the world became, you know, in a way in a chrysalis space. So what ended up happening is that we created this total virtual experience. Like initially it was gonna be a small thing that was in the park that was just like, we were gonna have water and bathrooms and let people hang out, but not do the big parade thing and engage community. So a lot of that stuff ended up shifting into like, all right, let's do this virtual thing where we have a virtual parade. Erin Sharkey, who's my creative partner, was very instrumental in like designing with a group of people, a committee, about like, how do we honor this virtual May Day, to keep people safe, because these puppet people can be very, very strange around their commitment to, I don't know, y'all. I don't want to, I mean, I'm a puppet person too. I'm not trying to talk stuff, but I'm just saying. So then we have like, you know, yo, stay home, like let's have a virtual parade. Let's invite artists to do virtual activities with people in the weeks leading up to it, because a lot of people, what they're grieving, which is a lot of what we were dealing with. But when we were just saying like, let's take a pause on this parade, it's just people's grief about how so much meaning was held up. in this parade and in their identity as puppeteers who do this great thing every year. So like this year, we just had a lot of space for grieving. We had Sarita Collette, an Indian American like yoga educator and healer, do like a grieving breathing meditation the day of to open up the day. We had all of these videos of people saying Happy May Day. We had, like I shared, like a virtual parade that Mike Hoyt, another artist, had put together where people had created all of these cool little parade things. And it was beautiful and it was quiet and like you felt the sweetness of May Day in the air, but also there was like sort of this way that we got what we wanted, this chrysalis. And that like, you know, we also got to find out, like similar to the question I was asking you, Shey, like how can this virtual reality, as it were, be something that we could utilize to make the parade more accessible to people who cannot be in, you know, May Day in that space in the same way. So anyhow, like, do you think I said everything I needed to say, Candida?
Yeah, that was really great, a really great overview of what happened. I attended the Chrysalis May Day from my house, and I thought it was phenomenal. I'm so grateful, and I'm also grateful for, you know, as we see all of these organizations just canceling festivals, you know, that happen throughout the summer, and that's a big thing here in Minnesota. We love our summers, we love our festivals.
Yeah,
it's really incredible to see you guys and Heart of the Beast put together something that still honored the day and brought people together. So what feedback did you hear from people?
I think like a lot of people appreciated something to do, something to honor, something to like keep community safe. Isley, I'm in the middle of something, honey. Yeah, she got a good time and now she. Yeah, so yeah, I think like people felt really grateful to like be able to do something. I think like so much of people's struggle over the last year and several years of the Heart of the Beast is just like there's been a lot of change, or it can be a little bit like a dysfunctional family over there. But like, you know, there's just two new Aries what do they call interim directors, who are like these really dynamic women who are really reimagining, like similar to a lot of the work that Kathy is doing at MRAC. Like, how do we totally reimagine and be bold in these organizations that in a lot of ways can sort of hold the status quo and really hold aspects of power. Like, they're in our communities, and yes, like art is very important, but like so is eating, so is housing, so is, you know, all of these things that really affect, you know, people's ability to absorb art, and art is healing, you know? So like, I think I think like people are like grateful that there's sort of a new stance being made with Heart of the Beast and May Day. And I think like that's sort of the, yeah, like the excitement I have around being involved is like, how does May Day not just become like, oh yay, this hippie sort of experience, but then like doesn't necessarily stop gentrification in the community that it takes place in. It might enhance it actually. You know what I mean? Like, how are we actually able to address like the experience of sex work / sex trafficking that happens in the community? That's a part of the legacy of the community that like the theater is always really about. But it's like, you know, that's the community, like the indigenous community that's like largely in the region. Like, how does Heart of the Beast actually become a part of the community in a way that the community is Heart of the Beast, you know? So anywho. Yeah, I think people like that. I think I totally derailed from your question.
No, it was great. I mean, I could listen to you talk forever. So, you know, and I think that's probably most of us on this call right now.
Oh, Lord.
So I'm going to ask if people want to drop any questions in the chat. And while people are dropping questions, do you want to answer your own question about your astrological sign and
yeah,
gotten you through this?
Yeah, I'm a Cancerian. And I think like I always want people to feel like nourished, you know, like I think I really was grateful for the ways that things, all the kids are like lurking now. Like, yeah, I just wanted people to just feel like Yeah, nourish. Like, we don't have to figure this stuff out in a way. Like, we're in a global pandemic, y'all. Like, this isn't a game. Like, this isn't a thing to play with. So, like, how do we like sort of center our well-being first and then figure out what are the next steps? So, like, I think that was very much my way of handling it as a mama warrior Cancerian.
Right, and don't have any questions being dropped. So I'm just gonna ask a question about this. Who's the best sign in a pandemic?
Ooh, I don't know if there's a best sign. We need them all. Listen, I'm a person that loves all the signs. Even the ones that like I struggle with, I'm like, I need y'all too. Cause even if I'm like, ooh, like, cause there's a couple Capricorns who I do not like, but I love you, Candida. And I love my homegirl, Rachel. And I love my homegirl, Greta. Like, there's always a Capricorn where I'm like, yo, I appreciate for you teaching me those elements of the sign. Like, there's the shadow, there's the brightness. It's like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. We need us all, you know? Shay, were you going to say something? I would like people to chime in on this conversation.
Go ahead,
Nuck
Shay.
if you buck for your sign, though. Nuck if you buck. I don't mind.
I know Shay.
Oh, I can't hear you, Shay. We can't hear you. Oh, someone needs to unmute her. How do you unmute Shay?
I got it.
Unmute them. Sorry, my bad.
There we go, Shay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm just cheering you on. Love it. So true. So real. It's all cheering you on, you know?
No, I'm always taking over meetings with astrological bullshit, but hey.
It's okay. We love it. You know, I just want to say, if you're not following Janata on social media, if you have not yet read her book that she just put out, you got the book right there. You're gonna hold it up.
I don't know. Hold on a second. I will do it by the end of this stuff, though.
Okay. Definitely make sure that you check out her work. Such a multi-talented artist. Actually, let me just, I want to make sure I'm saying the name of the book right. In my head, it's The Stars and the Blackness Between Us, or is it Between Them?
Between them.
Between Them.
Here it is. Oh, hold on. Let me take my background off. I need to sit back down. Yeah, but I mean, not that I'm here to promote me, but I will let y'all know about my book.
Please do it. Go ahead.
Okay, hold on. Let me take the virtual background off.
Oh, and we also just dropped a link in the chat about it.
Oh, there it goes.
Yeah. And before we go, do you want to just say a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's a queer Black YA diaspora novel, and it takes place between these two girls, one from Trinidad, that's where my mom is from, and one girl in Minneapolis. And the girl in Trinidad gets sent to live with her Black American dad, and she falls in love with this other girl, because she had a situation in Trinidad, in which, nicely, for real, scram.
What is this? What is this?
I don't know what it is. And then
Can I open it?
Yeah. No. You know what? You're about to be in.
This is the
They're
reality.
all starting to conspire
I know.
against
Yeah, I know,
you.
right?
Yes,
I know. You're like, how do I
It's
parent
okay.
on a Zoom call? All right, my parenting is different.
Watch out. Robin's dolls are going to get up and start dancing in just a minute.
know.
They all know that there's nothing we can do to stop them at this point.
It's true, right? But there is a man on death row who's an astrologer in this book. There's a lot of like sensuous, young kind of love and sadness and emo-ness. But yeah, so there's an astrology poem for each sign in here. So, you know, that's an incentive.
I highly recommend, if you have not read the book yet, to check it out. Find a small local bookseller. This is my daughter Coco.
I know, Millie Wapton.
Yeah. So if you're in Minnesota, or even if you're not, Moon Palace Books is still going online, and I know you can order the book there. So thank you so much, Janata. Okay, child. I think, we have to close out now, but before we close out, I do want to say that this toolkit is meant to be a living document. And if you go to the link where you got the toolkit, you can also put in projects that you're working on or projects that you've seen, because we want to update this document probably in about a month. And in that way, it'll serve as documentation of all the things that we're innovating over this time. So before we go, though, maybe we'll just pass it back to every panelist to say some closing words for us. Get my child off the screen.
Or maybe this is her moment to shine, who knows? So I want to say this. So I've been taking notes as each person talked about their practice and how it's been changed by the pandemic. And so I want to just throw these short things out for everybody. Things that I learned from each of you tonight. Use what you have, but ask for what you need. Be bold. No act is too small, no gesture too great. Remember your community, and above all else, you must nourish yourself before you can nourish someone else. So, does anyone else want to add to that? Is there anything they want to share?
That was perfect.
Nobody? I guess nobody, Candida, but please go. Like, as Candida was saying, oh, Shey.
Oh, Shey got something to say.
But she's muted. There you go.
They.
Oh, they're muted. They're muted. Yes. Sorry.
Perfect. No, just that was beautiful. And some of the stuff that was already said stuck to me, like time to be bold and how we take care of ourselves and our communities. I think that was Kathy. Also, this is a moment of healing and transformation that was shared too. And yeah, those are the things I take away. I take away from this space bravery, creativity, and like the energy to just change all this stuff up, blow it up, and start all over again, connect
Hell
to
yeah.
roots, heal, and just dump it and start new.
I love it. And start new.
I have the courage to let folks know what I will not do anymore on the other side of this. Not going to do it. DEI committees ain't doing them. Not doing it. I won't return to that stuff. I will not. I'm giving myself permission. That's what reset is about. I'm not
reset. Talk about it. Well, but all the artists are resetting.
Yeah.
Because we've been forced due to these systems to run on burnout, to be exhausted, to be spread thin. And I think, in a lot of ways, some of us are for sure still being spread thin, but I think like we all have had this forced reset to where we're like, oh, hold up. Like where is the energy supposed to be really going? So yeah, I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
That's real. That's super important. Thinking of like all the things that are dumped on us to do emotional labor, but also the awareness of, we're slowing down now. So we can really pay attention to the things we don't want, like Robin was sharing, like who we don't want for real.
Absolutely.
I think especially in the arts sector and the arts and culture sector, there's this weird false sense of urgency, which I really appreciate that it was brought up a couple of times. But like, we need to assess our priorities. What are we really doing here? It's supposed to be about relationships and connection and healing. And it's like, if it's not about that, then.
I just want to throw out there to you guys that Forecast is also hosting conversation space for BIPOC artists and organizers every Saturday night at 6 p.m. Central Time. It's open to artists from around the country. We've had 2 of them already. We're going to have at least 4 more, and this is where the conversation is going, and we're sharing our work, and we're
I bet it
sharing
is.
living space. So I invite you guys and anybody who's listening right now to head on over on Saturday nights. It's been a great space. We a lot of people in pajamas and laying in their beds and just chilling. It's really good.
I love it. I love it.
This
So
is
I
this
wanted
is
to
the
say-
conversation. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I also want to encourage folks who may be watching this after it's been recorded and aren't with us right now. We'll see it later. First of all, thanks for watching. But second, I want to invite them to tell us things that they're interested in hearing us talk about. What are the experiences that they're having? Can they share that with us? What and who are they seeing do things differently? What kind of advice do they want to offer? What advice are they getting that they took and they wish they had known it sooner? Someone asked the question of what are some low cost or free resources that artists might be able to use? We really want to get that information in the hands of artists so they can use it to build their practice and support their community. So if you have questions, if you have answers, please share those with us. You can email us at info@forecastpublicart.org. You can email me directly at Hawona@forecastpublicart.org. I'm happy to hear more about your experiences with watching the webinar and what you'd love for us to talk about in the future.
I want to say too, an example of what we can begin to do. A sister artist got in touch with me immediately on Facebook, basically saying, I got you. I will help you go to the next level. When we stand in the gap for one another, we can win this thing.
That's amazing.
I mean, I'm like, whoa, we can do this. That's what it is. I mean, I'm just like so moved, right?
Yeah, me too.
And I also think like we are laborers and we're part of like it's not just us as artists, but it's us as workers in a broader sense. Like there needs to be guaranteed national income. There needs to be healthcare for everyone. It's not just about us. Right? We want to do our work, but everyone has the right to, an honest, well-paid, life.
Luxurious life.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Of leisure and chilling.
That's right.
Shoot.
Well, I feel like maybe we need to just have another webinar with all of y'all just talking about this, because I could listen to this conversation for hours and I'm sure other people could too.
This is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
So honored. Thank you.
Yeah. This has been an amazing panel. And again, thank you for doing the work that is inspiring us and inspiring others and holding us as a big global community. So we are gonna sign off now.
No, I'm just like.
we might have to have another one of these. So really, thank you all so much for being here tonight.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye, y'all.
Lots of love. Thanks.
And thank everyone for watching. And this was recorded, so it will be available, although I'm very sorry about my beginning time. But this was fantastic. Thank you.
Bye.